Welcome back to Trail and Ultra Running Training. My name is Will Frantz, and the whole goal of this podcast is to help you train a little better so we can have more fun out on the trails. I'm a running coach and a strength coach. Today, I'm going to talk about a few things that we often overlook when signing up for races. I think I have 6. We'll see what happens. I'm bad at planning. And on that note, this is where we often overlook things when it comes to races because we get really excited and we get into a mood, or we're with people or they're signing up for them. And then we can just often not fully think about some of the things that might come along with whatever race we really want to do. Now, if you enjoy this information or you appreciate it or whatever, I'd really love it if you hit subscribe or follow or whatever on your relevant platform. Or just send it to someone. That would also be great. Now, when we sign up for races, there's more than just the distance, right? First, I really think it should to some degree call to you. Now, if you really love running and all you want to do is run and you run 100 miles a week and you just want to keep running 100 miles a week and run more, then it probably doesn't matter. You'd probably be just as happy running around a high school track as you would a trail, as you would the road. And it's not a negative, it's just that not everybody's the same, right? A lot of people want to see a historic city. I have very little interest in a road marathon. I would actually really love to run that Paris course because it was interesting to me how many historical sites they put in it. It had a wide variety of difficulty and elevation, and you're running along the Seine, and the whole thing just actually looked really interesting to me. Whereas most of the time, I don't have a lot of interest in the road marathon stuff. I would rather be on the trails, so that's a big consideration for me. It should call to you. And some of this is just that you're going to spend a lot of time doing this. It's going to take up a large chunk of your life for a significant period of time. So you probably should actually want to enjoy that, right? If you're doing a year, 6 months, 18-month block of training, that's not a small portion of your life. We're talking at least 1% of your overall life. And if athletics are important to you, or it's part of your mental health management, or just something you love to do, then we should probably be pursuing something that we actually do really fully enjoy. So, does it call to you? Is this a race that you want to do? Does the training that you'll have to do this race actually interest you? Now, on that, let's come to number 2. What does my event require? I think, again, we often just look at the distance and not necessarily look at some of the other metrics. We might even just look at distance and elevation and then just completely ignore everything else, right? We should look at, is it a lot of hiking? Is there a lot of downhill? Is there a lot of uphill? Are the hills few and far between? Are they incredibly steep? I heard someone on Coop's podcast describe UTMB. It's just a lot of straight up and down and not really being able to find a rhythm, right? So that's the thing we should probably know of. Are they rolling? You can gather a lot of elevation in rolling hills, even if you're not actually damn near climbing a mountain with crampons, right? Are there roots? Are there rocks? Is it slick rock like you might encounter in some of the races in Moab? If so, you're probably going to want to do a lot of road training. Because that's what it feels like. And you should make sure that your bones and your shins and your knees and all these things feel good when running on that significantly harder surface. We should look into some of the deeper stuff that a race requires beyond just the distance and the elevation profile. And we should think about whether that's a thing that we actually want to do. It's a thing that we actually want to train for. And for example, let's talk about elevation, because that's a thing that we do kind of think about, but we might not think about enough. If we look at a race like the one that I'm thinking about next year, Mogollon Monster 100 in September, well, it has, I think, 17,000-ish feet of elevation gain, which I believe is actually really similar to Western States. However, the profile couldn't be more different. The Western States profile is quite a bit downhill, whereas the Mogollon is a huge spike and then a plateau and then a huge down drop, right? So we have to be really good at running these, or hiking realistically. Some of these climbs are like 30 to 50% grade very briefly. So we need to make sure that we're able to get up the side of this hill, and then we can run for a while. Then we have to be able to get down the side of the hill, which means that we're going to have to plan for that in our training. I know for a fact that my Achilles and my calves are going to need to go through some, let's call it hardening. I'm going to need to make sure that I stretch my ankles and I use the slant boards and give myself the best possible opportunity to not get injured on that steep of an incline. Whereas if we're doing something that has a very similar elevation total, but a very different profile, then we might not end up with having to do as much of that calf training, right? Because you're just going to be able to run. It might be this like steady grade up and down through rolling hills. It'll still be hard. It's still a similar technical amount of work, but it's dispersed differently. So your body will have to deal with it differently. Same thing, like if you run a Rudy race, the Hurt 100 is notorious for all the banyan trees and stuff. And if you can't, if your ankles are unstable or your feet like to cramp or your shoes and you don't necessarily get along, then this is just asking for injury. So what are some of these deeper, maybe not as easily accessible information that we could find that would help us do well in our race and prevent getting hurt? Now, how far away is it? And I think this is a thing that we think about, but maybe not give full credence to, right? Do you have time to build appropriately? How fit are you right now? If it's 100 miles and you're running 15 miles per week, then maybe don't sign up for it in 4 months. Whereas if it's a 100-miler and you're currently running 50 to 60 miles a week, then you can easily, nothing's ever easy, but you can easily do that in 4 months, right? It just kind of depends where you are, what your training is. Do you have enough time to build without getting hurt? If not, maybe let's look at it next year. I realize nothing's guaranteed, races disappear, things change. Maybe your friends are doing it this year and they won't be doing it next year. There's a lot of reasons it's not technically the same. But if it's a race that you actually want to do, if it's one that you really care about, then maybe we give it the credence it deserves and you sign up for it 12 months later and you actually go into it feeling confident, strong, and like you can perform how you deserve or how you would like to perform on a race that really matters to you. Now, we should also look at whether we need to learn new skills, and this kind of goes back to number 2 of what it requires, but all of these go together, right? Do you have time to learn new skills would be part of it. Poles are one that's often discussed because, they're not that complicated. It's not rocket science. Nothing we do is rocket science, but it does take a little bit of coordination and practice. So if you're going to do a race where you think you want to use poles, you need to get them early and start using them. You need to figure out how to run with them. You need to make sure they fit. You might need to try a few different ones to see what works for you and make sure that you're not stabbing other people while you're running around, right? You need to make sure that you can time the ups and actually use it. We need to also probably see if you have the upper body strength to use them well. Because if you have never used poles and you've never lifted anything with your upper body, then it's going to take a little off your legs, but it might create a very similar level of systemic fatigue because your arms are just going to be tired and then you're going to be carrying some shit you don't want to be carrying. And again, back to race profile, poles are not all that helpful in certain types of terrain, depending on how good you are with using them. There are definitely some routes that I've taken where I would have found poles unhelpful, right? If there's big rocky step downs, then you just have to carry something else as you kind of sit on your butt and move down. Unless you're very good at posting and planting from either skiing or doing it for a long time, then they might not be all that useful. So we want to practice with them long enough to where they feel more like an extension of your body, to where you can use them smoothly. So if you're going to need to figure out skills, then that's important. You can also talk about this in terms of strength training, right? This is not necessarily the message here, but this is a thing I think about when looking at strength training for people. If we are coming at a race without a lot of time and the person isn't strong enough, like physically, to do the race, and we need to get them stronger, then maybe we don't spend a lot of time learning to back squat, because by the time they have learned that skill in 3 months, it will be race day. Whereas if we just put them on a leg press, as much as I think squatting is a very valuable movement that we should probably do, if we just put them on a leg press, then they could actually get stronger and be ready for their race, because we didn't waste so much time in skill development. So this comes not just in the running thing, it's also in the overall aspect of training. Do we have enough time to develop this skill that we're trying to develop in somebody for that to be helpful? And do you want to be running a lot during the time of year you'll need to be running in order to train for the race? And this is one that I know for a fact people overlook, because I've had this conversation more than once with a wide range of climates, actually, be it the desert in the summer and having to run outside or choose the treadmill, or running through icy winters, right? Fall and spring races are lovely. The weather is amazing. It's a good time to be outside. It's colorful in one aspect or another. It's either flowers are blooming or the leaves are changing, or it's just a really nice time to be running. But I also think that we overlook where the training is happening for these races. And that's not a site don't do it, right? Because no matter what, you're going to be training long enough that you're going to run into weather problems. Unless you live in a very the perfect climate where it's just great all year round, then this is never going to be a non-issue. You're always either going to have to run in a hot summer or run through the snow or do something, or just become really good friends with your treadmill. Any of those are really good options. But you should think about that. Because if the reason you really like running is to be able to run outside and run on the trails and spend a bunch of time out there, but you also don't like to wake up at 4 a.m. and it's 1,000 degrees out, then we should probably realize that running a fall race may not be your ideal training plan. Same with the winter. If you hate to run in the snow and you really don't want to do the treadmill, then maybe spring races aren't your jam, right? So let's think not just when the race is, not just when this beautiful weather is going to be for the actual race day, but also when you'll be training, right? And finally, what's going on around your race? Are you moving? Are you planning to get a dog? Do you have a kid on the way? Are you getting married? Is your kid getting married? Any of these things are going to be stressful because they're going to take a shitload of time. And if we don't realize that it's going to take a bunch of time, then we might not have the time we want to train for our race, or we're going to be super stressed out, or we won't sleep, or any of these things, right? There's a wide range of factors that may not make it time to train. On the other hand, it might give you something to do depending on what you're dealing with. I think there's a very good reason why a lot of people get into running after a breakup or after a divorce or after whatever. And it's not just to get in shape. It's also because your brain's in a shitty space and it gives you a way or a place to outlet your feelings in a healthy manner. So I'm not saying, again, to not do it if it would be helpful, but just maybe realize that if you need to train 15 hours a week or something during peak to train for the 100 you want to do, then probably don't schedule it the exact same time as your kid's wedding if you're going to be super involved in your kid's wedding. So that's all. Just make sure we plan a little bit so that you have the time to train that you feel like you need. And a lot of these things might feel obvious, right? I might be going through these things and you're just yeah, no shit, Will. Well, I think we often overlook them, not because we don't know them or because we don't ever think about them or we think it's a waste of time, it's because we just like get stoked and sign up for a race because we're like looking for something to do. We're at work and we're bored and we just start scrolling alter sign up and like figure out what's in our area and like, oh, that looks fun. That's during a time of year where I'm not doing a bunch, or because someone else said it's a good idea. Like someone in your run club said, hey, I'm going to do this thing. Do you want to do this thing with me? It'll be so fun. Let's please do this thing. And you sign up for it and then you realize like, oh, my knees hurt when I run on slick rock, and you signed up for a thing in Moab and now my patellar tendon's going to feel like shit. Right? Like these are things that we just don't, we get excited because it's fun and we like doing the thing. But maybe think for 12 seconds before hitting the sign up button and make sure that it's something you actually want to do so that you don't spend a significant chunk of your life training for something that you don't actually want to do. Anyway, I hope this was helpful, and I'm going to be back soon with another one of these. I'm not 100% sure what next week looks like because at some point I will be crewing for the Wasatch 100, but other than that, if you need me, shoot me a DM. I'd be happy to help with all of your running, well, most of your running qualms. Not overstretch myself there, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Have some fun on the trails. Thank you again for listening to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Just a reminder, nothing you hear on this podcast is medical advice, and you should always speak with a medical professional before making changes to your training or your nutrition. If you enjoyed the podcast or found it helpful, please leave a rating or review. It tells the algorithm robots that people like it, and that means more people will hear it. Or even better, just share it with someone who you think would benefit. If you prefer a video version, head to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Group on Facebook, or check out the Mountain Goat Endurance Coaching YouTube channel. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great next run.